homelessness, the shoplifting, all the carjackings, the armed robberies. They're all surging. Progressive prosecutors were elected by their constituents.
Can you rewind it? Or
maybe
you can't. You probably can't.
So what would you do to end the revolving door of criminality?
Oh, this is a crime question. I was trying to find it was a crime or was this a homeless question?
For 7 years, I ran the 5th largest office in this country.
I'll be right back to you.
At the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey, and we set records for the number of prosecutions that we brought that still have not been broken. And the reason was that we went after the crime that was affecting people's lives. And as president, I will appoint an attorney general and instruct that attorney general that you are to put all the resources that are necessary to bring our cities back under control. The fact is they will be stretched. There's no doubt about that, but that's what they take the job for, because they love the idea of enforcing the law. We've got to bring law and order back to this country. And not just in our cities, but we need law and order back everywhere. We need law and order back in our suburbs. People are threatened there. We need it in our rural areas. People feel threatened there. And we need it in Washington, D.C. also. And Donald Trump should be here to answer for that, but he's not. And I want to look at that camera right now and tell you, Donald, I know you're watching. You can't help yourself.
This is the part that's going to be on Morning Joe tomorrow, okay? I can tell you right now, Chris Christie will be on Morning Joe.
You're not here tonight because you're afraid of being on the stage and defending your record. You're ducking these things. And let me tell you what's going to happen. You keep doing that, no one up here is going to call you Donald Trump anymore.
And his poll numbers are going to go up.
Duck.
All right. I want to ask Governor DeSantis,
who wrote that joke?
A couple of prosecutors.
You hire Sam Cedar
to write that joke? You would not have the ability to do that. How do you think about dealing with the root causes of crime, especially this revolving door of the criminals?
Y'all not talking about
just get out and come back and commit another crime?
Well, the crime in these cities is one of the strongest signs of the decaying of America. We can't be successful as a country if people aren't even safe to live in places like Los Angeles and San Francisco. Just being in Southern California over the last couple of days, my wife and I have met 3 people who have been mugged on the street. And that would have never happened 10 or 20 years ago. In Florida, we back the blue. We support the men and women of law enforcement. They are keeping us safe. We have a 50-year low in the crime rate. And yes, when I had 2 progressive prosecutors that weren't following the law in Florida, I removed them from their posts, and the people of Florida are safer as a result of it. As president, I will use the Justice Department to bring civil rights cases against all of those left-wing Soros-funded prosecutors. We're not going to let them get away with it anymore.
Civil rights
we want to reverse this country's decline.
They just say whatever they want to say, man.
Over rioting and disorder.
On a related subject, Governor Haley, there's a nationwide policing shortage. Retirees recruitment is in the tank. Morale is at a record low. 3 years ago, you signed a pledge to support law enforcement. Now, pledges are a nice idea, but what's your actual plan to get more police on our streets?
Well, and I actually did it in South Carolina, too. You know, what we knew in South Carolina was you take care of those who take care of you. We have to start taking care of law enforcement, but it's not just taking care of them with words. It's making sure that you also follow through on what they do. Right now, we have a lot of stolen guns on the street. Well, these law enforcement officers, they arrest these people and then they go and they're let out the very next day. So law enforcement feels like no one has their back. We have to start prosecuting according to the law. We have to make sure we have the backs of law enforcement, and we have to make sure that we're a country of law and order. But I want to go back to China because I don't think we spent enough time on that.
Oh, you want to be unhinged? We didn't be unhinged enough.
Against China, you have a company, U.S. Antibiotics, that produces amoxicillin, the #1 antibiotic that we need. And right now, there's a company in Bristol, Tennessee.
If you don't feel safe with the amount of police that we have, you are a coward who would never feel safe.
We need to be focusing on companies that produce in America and supporting those companies that produce in America, not companies that are helping China.
Governor, we will be talking foreign policy later. Delia?
Yes,
I can't wait for that one.
We're going to stay in the topic of crime because it affects all of us. Governor Burgum, for the first time ever, the Univision poll found that mass shootings and gun safety are one of the most important issues for Latino voters.
You see what I'm saying, Nick? This is another one. It's like she's put there to ask questions that they absolutely don't give one fuck about.
Plan to curb gun violence.
They don't care about gun violence.
First, we need to understand is I think that the liberal left seems to be just completely bent on prosecuting law-abiding citizens that are gun owners, because every solution they have to this is take away the Second Amendment rights of Americans, and somehow that's going to solve the problem. But all these cities that we're talking about that you showed the videos of tonight, they have some of the strictest gun laws in the country. So we know that that's not what's working. But what we have to do is get back to the core issues about the family. We have to get back to behavioral health and mental health. We've got to get back to actually enforcing the laws these people talked about. And like we've done in North Dakota, where we've got the goal and we're on the track to be the most military-friendly state in the nation. We've got the most military and the most support of what we're doing in terms of law enforcement, because the morale is down because we've been defunding the police because they've been attacked in the press. The police have become the bad guys when they're the one.
They are the bad guys. We got to keep our attacks up. If it's affecting them, maybe this is the way we defund. Defund by embarrassment. Go ahead.
To be clear, sir, the police are defunding themselves
every single day.
Yeah, because the morale is so low.
Mr. Ramaswamy,
We
according
did
to
that.
Customs and Border
We did
Protection, about 90% of fentanyl is seized at official border crossings, and 57% of the smugglers are U.S. citizens. How would you stop fentanyl?
You see how she said there to
mostly by U.S. citizens through ports of entry?
There's two sides to this, and we have to be very honest about it. One is we do have to seal that southern border. Building the wall is not enough. They're building cartel-financed tunnels underneath that wall. Semi-trucks can drive through them. We have to use our own military to seal the Swiss cheese of a southern border. But we also have to be honest. There's a demand-side problem in this country, too, a mental health epidemic. I met family in Iowa. Two parents, Kathy and Derek. They lost their son,
Nick,
Sebastian, 17 years old.
Established
he
facts,
got Percocet
and he doesn't want to have to
and then he
address
died. Why did he die? Because
Fentanyl is being brought in by Americans, sir.
That is closer to
Your whole
bioterrorism, not a
unhinged
drug
push
overdose.
about China that we covered in another segment,
to make sure that never happens.
What are you talking
but
about?
It's also our job to make sure that 17-year-olds don't turn to Percocet via Snapchat. We have to bring back mental health care in this country, not with pumping pharmaceuticals, but with faith-based approaches that restore purpose and meaning in the next generation of Americans. Many of them are getting it through social media. And this isn't a Republican point or a Democrat point, but if you're 16 years old or under, you should not be using an addictive social media product, period. This is something that we can both agree on, and we can revive both the mental health of this country while stopping the fentanyl epidemic that will kill more people this year than who died on 9/11. And I refuse to be a passive bystander.
She already said 90% of fentanyl is caught at the border. He just skips over that.
Address this problem to stand for Americans and our children.
Why are you encouraging TikTok? Quit encouraging TikTok.
And Nick, I did a segment 2 days ago. Vivek wants to invade Mexico when he becomes president.
The Mexican drug cartels. They are killing our people.
Him too.
And the
Him
stories
too.
that I've
These
seen in
people
Florida, we had an
unhinged.
infant, 18
This
months.
is where they talk about
Parents
invading
rented an
Mexico.
Airbnb. And apparently the people that had rented it before were using drugs. The infant was crawling, the toddler was crawling on the carpet and ingested fentanyl residue and died. Are we just going to sit here and let this happen? This
I don't know.
carnage happen in
Are
our
you?
country?
What about
I am
the
not going
kid
to
that
do
ingests
I
lead
guarantee you
from
on day
buildings
one, this
that was
border is
used?
gonna be
Or
a
what do
day
we
one
do about
issue for
that?
me as
Like this?
president, we're going to declare it a national emergency. Yes, we'll build the wall. We'll do remain in Mexico.
What
but
about
those
the
Mexican
kid that
drug
was
cartels
shot
are
by
gonna
the
be
police
treated like the foreign
accidentally?
terrorists.
Like, what are we doing about that, Dan? It's like just.
The world's problems land in the Oval Office. During the presidential debates in the year 2000, neither Al Gore nor George W. Bush was asked about Al-Qaeda. Yet, just 1 year later, Al-Qaeda's attack on September 11th claimed nearly 3,000 lives. And the farther we get from September 11th, the closer we are to September 10th. Senator Scott, you have no executive branch experience. What has prepared you to protect the nation from a major man-made national security crisis?
One of the things I've had the good fortune of doing is serving on committees in the United States Senate, like the Senate Armed Services Committee. I'm on the Senate Foreign Relations
I
Committee.
think it's because of the donors, Nick,
and the Banking
because
Committee.
they don't want the conversation to come up that
passed
there's
it
a lot
through
of
the
Republicans
Banking
that's
Committee
not
and the
for it.
Senate that would freeze
So it's
the
like
assets
we
and
can't
sanction the
even really
accounts
talk
of
about
the
this
Mexican
because our
cartels.
donors are
There
for the
weapons that
war,
we
but we
have
got
within the
candidates
arsenal.
that's not
But
for
I
the
was
war.
able to get past
As you
23
notice, they
to
kept
0
interrupting
in the
Vivek when he wanted to bring
polarizing
up how
Senate as it
Zelensky.
is.
He
I've
was about to
also
bring up the
understood without
Nazi thing, and they
question
interrupt.
the
They don't
fact
want
that
none of
if you
this
look
stuff.
at the
I think that's
details
why they
before
probably like, oh, let's
9/11,
move on.
there was
Vivek is going to bring up
information and
Nazis. We need to
intelligence
move
that was
on.
available that
You're absolutely
suggested
right.
an attack was
Yeah,
coming.
they don't want that
Having the right
conversation.
intelligence partners with us is key to making sure that we prevent the next 9/11 from ever happening. Having that experience for the last 10 years is really important in getting the job done.
30 seconds to you, Mr. Pence.
Well, I think you asked a question about executive experience, and I think it's vitally important. And I stand before you today as a candidate for president because I think this country's in a lot of trouble. And you hear the fire on the stage tonight. You hear the fire in all of our voices. And it's because Joe Biden has weakened this country at home and abroad. This is a time for those of us that have the experience, the tested experience, and a commitment to the conservative agenda that Ronald Reagan brought forward in this party of a strong national defense, standing with our allies, standing up to our enemies, supporting limited government and traditional values, need to step forward.
Understood.
Because frankly, our party does face a time for choosing, as they said at the top of this debate, whether we're going to stand on the foundation of that conservative agenda that Ronald Reagan poured, or whether we're going to follow the siren song of populism unmoored to conservative
And now it
principles.
is a
I'm
time
the most
for-
experienced, most qualified, and most consistent conservative in this field, and I'm ready to lead America at home and abroad.
I
on
would
day
just
one.
turn their
for choosing
mics
to go
off,
to a
man.
break.
Just
We
turn their
need to
mics
go to a
off.
commercial break. Reagan built a coalition that lasted decades. Can any of these candidates do the same?
All right, let's go.
We'll
Let's
take that
go.
up when the debate continues.
Dude, I'm literally have to do a statement just on the foreign policy part alone. And this is what I was saying earlier. Nikki Haley is a absolute psychopath. She's the most unhinged.
She was the most unhinged.
So you guys understand, and this is the argument that I make, and I hold the United States and NATO accountable, because what do I say, CJ? Every country will behave the way that Russia is behaving if you had a hostile foreign policy power, finance CIA, you had the CIA fund Nazis in Ukraine to overthrow the government. You had NATO expansion to the Russian border. So every country would do what Russia is doing to protect their national sovereignty, correct? Now, these same people, these same neocons like Nikki Haley, who criticize Russia for invading Ukraine, even though there's Western influence involved, they want to invade Mexico, even though there's no foreign influence in Mexico. So you're allowed to invade Mexico? Mike Pence and Trump is allowed to sponsor a coup in Venezuela? But you guys want us to melt down over Russia. So if we all understand that Russia will behave in the way a state will behave if their sovereignty is threatened, shouldn't we hold accountable the people who threatened their sovereignty in the first place? Now, there's no international foreign power in Mexico. So the United States is intervening in Mexico with no threat. So it's also the same defense that Israel uses Syria. So you have Israel bombing Syria. They do it all the time. They say they got pro-Iran, anti-Israel fighters planted in Syria. So that's why they have to bomb them. And they have the right to bomb them. The United States support Israel bombing Syria because they view a hostile foreign threat arming hostile insurgents against them. The United States support that, CJ. So it's okay for Israel to bomb Syria, but they want us to have Putin derangement syndrome for him behaving the same way any other leader will behave in the situation. And she just admits it. It's just absurd she don't see it. And CJ, you had a great point earlier. And I may do it like maybe tomorrow. We may just clip the foreign policy part and talk about it. Because I was literally biting, my tongue was almost off. I bite my tongue extremely hard because I didn't want to interrupt it too much. There's so much to break down, even though they only covered like foreign policy like 10 to 15 minutes. That is alone why I watched the debate. It's extremely frustrating. It's only that amount. But the foreign policy debate alone, there's a lot to take away from that. For one, they are terrified of Vivek and the right-wing criticism of the Ukraine war. And you mentioned this earlier. It's a great point. So they don't want the audience to hear how Zelensky was banning Orthodox Christians in Ukraine. They were banning churches, opposition parties. They banned democracy. They banned opposition media. If you say that, you can't argue that we're protecting democracy.
Right.
So soon as Vivek starts speaking about that, all of a sudden, the moderators allow interruption. And we covered this last time, CJ. Remember how the moderators will allow people to interrupt if it goes for the established interest. And remember, Bernie, during his debate, Pete Buttigieg interrupted him, and they allowed him just to speak over Bernie. So the moderators, they don't believe in civil debate. They will allow you to interrupt your competition if your competition speaks about something that is inconvenient. But sorry, I went for a while. There was a lot to break down. CJ, quick thoughts before?
Yeah, no, just to piggyback, that was glaring to me, that because you, like, if I can hear what he's saying and I can just tell, oh, those 3 words, I know what he's about to say. I know they're doing the same thing. It's like, oh, you're about to say this, or you're not. You get what I'm saying? That's exactly what they did. And they weren't really coherently trying to make a statement. They were just trying to talk so you couldn't clearly hear him. Then when Nikki stopped doing that, Mike started doing the same thing. When you can hear, he was about to bring up the Canadian thing with the Nazis, and they just started interrupting him. And then the moderator participated too and just moved on. She didn't go, hold on, it was Vivek's turn, let him talk. She just said, oh, let's move on to the next question.